A very good morning to you. Welcome to the West Ham Boys. Thank you for joining me on Tuesday, the 8th of July. And at the time of recording this video, there's still no movement in the transfer market for West Ham as yet. However, all that is very likely to change with the imminent departure of Mohammed Kudus and, of course, the imminent arrival of El Haj Malik Diouf. So we're looking forward to those two things happening, aren't we? Look, I've been away for the weekend. My thanks to Paul, Mr. Williams, and his lovely lady Sue for putting up with me and Linny for the weekend. Really had a good time in Hastings, and we enjoyed the Love Supreme festival as well, even though it rained, and it rained quite a bit. Hence, not doing any videos over the weekend. And if you're new to this channel, first time you're watching the West Ham Voice, or if you've watched the West Ham Voice before but yet to become a subscriber, please do subscribe to the channel. Costs nothing to subscribe, all the content is free. And if you enjoy this video, please hit the like button. So on Monday, we saw the return of the senior team for pre-season training. Almost all the players were there. And the only ones that were missing, from what I could see, were Nayef Aguerd, Emerson, and Edson Alvarez. But we know Alvarez has got a good reason why he was away. But what about Aguerd? Well, we all know that he specifically asked not to be part of pre-season training. And I would hope that if he hasn't bothered to turn up for West Ham training, then West Ham haven't bothered to pay him his wages. There is apparent new interest in Aguerd, and that comes from New Boys Premier League team, Sunderland. Yep, Sunderland. They're throwing their hat in alongside Marseille, and from what we understand, several teams from Italy. Now, look, as far as interest from abroad is concerned, we've been hearing Aguerd being linked to teams in France, Spain, and Italy for quite some time now. But it seems that no one is making that first bid for the Moroccan international. With his wages of around £55,000 a week, plus West Ham wanting north of around £20 million to sell Aguerd, it seems that the European market is not quite on par with his price tag or wages. And European teams may not likely want to pay anything like £20 million, and I have a feeling they're playing the long game to see whether West Ham might end up having to sell Aguerd for a lot less, maybe around 15 mil. Now, I wonder if Sunderland really are interested, whether they might up the ante. And if they do put a bid in for the player, maybe that might wake up the likes of Marseille to throw their bid in as well. Look, so far, West Ham have been adamant that they want the right sort of money to sell any of their players. And I, for one, I'm happy with that stance. I'm happy with West Ham taking that approach. For far too long, we bought players for far too high a price and then sold them on for nothing, which is why we're in the mess that we're in now in having to sell players before we buy. But the downside of that, of course, is that the longer it takes to sell any of our players, the longer the delay in signing anyone new. And what of Emerson? Well, Emerson did seem like he wasn't at pre-season training as well. And perhaps with the stories lingering that we're imminently signing Malik Diouf from Slavia Prague, perhaps this is the sure sign that Emerson will not be returning to West Ham next season. Now, there is interest apparently with the likes of Lazio and one or two other teams in Italy interested in him, but nothing since last week has materialized. And then, of course, I've mentioned Edson Alvarez. There's a very different reason why he's missing preseason training. He's going to have 2 weeks off now, which is the standard for anyone that is on international duty. Alvarez was hugely instrumental in helping Mexico to win the CONCACAF Gold Cup tournament. And it was his winning goal in the final against the US that sealed it. This is the third Gold Cup tournament win for Alvarez. And on the whole, he's had a very, very good tournament. Many suggesting that he's back to his best. He captained the Mexican team throughout the whole tournament and didn't miss a minute of the 6 games that were played. Now, this, of course, helps West Ham in one of two ways. If he's to stay at the club, he has demonstrated that he is back to his best. And to have a decent defensive midfielder in the heart of West Ham's team would be most welcome, wouldn't it? But if he is to be sold, then his performances will have risen his stock somewhat, and there's no reason why we should not receive a decent bid for the player if any team comes calling. And that swiftly then leads us on to Mohammed Kudus. Now, as I predicted last week, I doubt we're going to see any movement in Kudus leaving until his £85 million release clause passes. And there's just 2 days left of that. So let's see what happens this coming Thursday. We're into day 8, 2 days remaining, and nothing is going to happen until that release clause is gone. And just as a note, despite Kudus appearing in the photos, it seems that his return to Rush Green training was limited only to the gym. And from what we now understand, it was Kudus who requested not to take part in training beyond the gym, which seems to indicate quite clearly that the end of his time at West Ham is very close, and will be sorted out this week. Now, if the recent stories are true, Mohammed Kudus only wants to go to Spurs, even though Chelsea and now Bayern Munich have shown an apparent interest in the player. Do I believe that? Do I buy that? Well, Kudus wants Champions League football, as we know, and if the right bid comes in for him from a team offering Champions League football, if it's acceptable to West Ham, then we're going to listen to those offers, despite what Kudus wants. Do I think he wants Spurs? Do I think he prefers to stay in London? I think maybe he does, because at this moment in time, Spurs are the only team showing an interest, a real interest. They're the only ones that have made a bid, as far as we're aware. Now, if Bayern put an offer in, would he go there? I think he would. I think he'd consider that quite seriously, to be quite honest with you. And maybe he himself is hoping that some other team to the level of Spurs, or even better, comes calling. But at this moment in time, it's Spurs who are in the running. Now, when the whole story about Kudus first broke, I did suggest that for the player himself, there are probably only a couple of teams that could really offer him, get the best out of him by playing him on the right side of attack. One of those was Spurs, and the other one is Newcastle. And it doesn't look like Newcastle are going to come calling anytime soon. When it comes to Chelsea, I asked whether Kudus might consider a move to West London as being a bit risky for him. The depth of the senior squad that Enzo Maresca has at his disposal might make him decide what he did last season, and that's using half the squad for Europe and cup competitions and the other half focusing on the Premier League. And then went on to say, imagine if Kudus went to Chelsea and was selected to focus primarily on Premier League and not getting much game time, if any, in the Champions League. Kudus ain't going to relish that. He wants to be on the centre stage. It's quite selfish, but that's what he wants. So in a way, when it comes as no surprise to me that at this moment in time, his apparent preference is for Spurs, because he too can probably see that he'll be one of the big players at Spurs, whereas at Chelsea, he's only likely to be a squad player. Now, of course, the flip side to this is that Chelsea are more likely to progress further in the Champions League than Spurs. So it may not be as perfect a move for Kudus as he might think. And then we look at Spurs' latest offer, which is that 50 million. That hasn't budged, but the add-ons have. Now, apparently, the latest offer was 50 million plus 12.5 million pounds in add-ons. So, for example, if Spurs were to win the Champions League or the Premier League or any other trophy, then we might get a little bit closer to 62.5 million pounds. Now, I'm glad West Ham are not entertaining it. After all, if there's anyone who can spot a low ball offer, it's David Sullivan. At the end of the day, it's going to be whoever offers us the most money for the player who will probably eventually get him. So if Bayern Munich came in and offered a solid bid of nearer 65 million, we would accept it. Let's see if Kudus does. Now, as far as Kudus' progression is concerned, I don't care if Chelsea decide to use him as a bit part player, a squad player or not, and none of us will care if Spurs don't progress in the Champions League. So if the stories are true, that at this moment in time he prefers Spurs, then I want to think that he isn't doing it to anger West Ham fans, but he's doing it for footballing reasons because he may believe that at this moment in time, it's only Spurs that's going to give him the freedom to play down on the right side of attack. But with his apparent preference for North London, does this weaken West Ham's hand in demanding top dollar for the player? No, I don't think so. If they want him, then they pay what we ask for. If they don't, then if no one else comes in for him, we keep him until a better bid comes in and he remains a West Ham player for next season. And would that really matter if he stayed at West Ham? Um, yes, okay, we need the money for it. But if Kudus is back to his best form, then would that really matter if we kept him? But then, of course, we find ourselves in a situation where if we can't sell him and we're relying on him to be sold to get money in, then the board will have to show some intent in order to use their personal money to invest in new players. As we know, we can spend, or they can spend, anything up to £90 million of their own money to buy players and ease PSR concerns. Now, the board, if they had to do that, will have to borrow money because, as we know, most of them are not cash rich. They're all sort of land rich and property rich, etc., and business rich. So any money that they may invest will probably have to be borrowed off the back of securing loans on personal land and properties. So hence, really, the desperate need to sell a player rather than using their own cash. Why borrow the money when you can actually use the money that you get from selling a player? It's not using. I'm not using that as an excuse for the board not investing their own money, but I guess that's the reality at this moment in time. They're not cash rich. So all eyes on what happens this week. This is the week that we're finally going to see some movement. You know, maybe by the time this video is over, we'll have heard that definitely we've got a player coming and we've got a player leaving. Still think it's going to be another day or so before that really happens, but we're going to see how it goes. Um, as far as the players that haven't come back are concerned, I think we can safely say that Aguerd and Emerson are going to be following Mohammed Kudus out the door. Will that happen this week? Let's see what happens. Thank you for watching and listening. Do leave your comments, and I will see you all again very soon.